Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Short Podcast. I'm your host, Ross Baxter. Today on the show, we have an amazing guest for you. We have an incredible artist and visual effects trainer. We have Jahirul Amin on the show. He's worked on so many amazing titles from Avengers, Endgame, Fantastic Beasts, The Crimes of Grindelwald, personal favourite, so thank you for being on that. Awesome film. Mission Impossible Fallout, Bohemian Rhapsody, and Venom. Thanks, man, for coming on the show. It means a lot.
No, thank you for having me. It's good to talk to you.
The podcast is live on 11 other platforms such as Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, Overcast, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, Stitcher, and last but not least, we've got YouTube. If you guys are tuning in on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe, smash the like button, and as always, turn on notifications to be notified every single week when the podcast is live. So the Shooting Art Podcast is sponsored by The Rookies. There is simply no better way to launch your career and start sharing your amazing work online. Throughout their website, you can create your own portfolio, enter lots of contests that take place all year round, and has an incredible community for non-professional digital artists. From hobbyists, students, self-taught artists, to even people wanting to make a career change, the Rookies community brings everyone together, allowing you to be surrounded by people on the same journey as you. So if you want to showcase your portfolio, grow as an artist, and track your progress, sign up to the Rookies today. By the way, this is the one question I wanted to ask before we get into the fun things. Out of all the films you've worked on, do you have a personal favourite?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I should say, in terms of films I'm working on, because I was always in the training department, let's say, most of the time, I'm helping the team out who are working on the shots or the assets.
Awesome.
But every now and then, they, usually when they haven't got anyone left to do anything, they'll ask me to maybe scan something, photograph something, and I really enjoy that. So doing the kind of in-house, a bit of on-set texture shoot, look dev reference shoot. One of the, it's a weird one. One of the things I probably spent all night with, around 6 to 8 hours with, was working on the show Red Sparrow.
All right, okay, awesome.
And it was Jennifer Lawrence's Tiara, and I probably spent too much time with that. Because it was photogrammetry, it was texture reference, look dev reference, video reference. Something I could have probably spent, a couple hours with. I just went to town with, because I wanted to kind of experiment with kind of capturing a very large data set. So I probably spent between 6 p.m. and I think it was around 2 p.m. just doing texture, look dev, model reference, everything I could have thought about at the time.
Oh my gosh.
So that was, a good experience. And then, I did some sort of prop shoots for, I think it was Assassin's Creed, which was fun. And so that was more on set. And then Mission Impossible, some of the on-set stuff for that as well, in terms of, again, in-house shooting reference. I think I did Tom Cruise's boot or something, which was
that's sick. Yeah.
enjoyable to look at. I didn't put it on, but maybe I should have done.
Yeah.
See what it's like. But other projects, I really actually enjoyed, Pacific Rim 2, because at that time they were making changes to their pipeline, and it was good to kind of see how things from start to end kind of get put together, thought about in terms of the project structure.
Of course.
Pushing data through the pipeline, that kind of thing was very interesting for me, because it was less about the what buttons are being pressed and so on, and more about project management. So I really enjoyed that. I kind of enjoyed that. That background work that goes into these big shows is phenomenal. There's a whole bunch of artists working in the background, technical artists, creative in terms of project management, and I found that side of things was great to be a part of, essentially.
Yeah. That's always the beauty of art, because at the end of the day, there's so many things that obviously come together to make the final shot, and I think obviously a lot of people have to realize though that it's not just obviously making beautiful shots, etc. There's so much technical stuff, like you said. There's so much, especially when it comes to, for example, everything that you do when it comes to teaching, everything that I've learned about you. It's crazy how much stuff you do. It's awesome to have you on. And by the way, before we even get to the podcast, I just want to say, everyone who's tuning in right now, make sure to give Jay a follow on all his social media platforms. So you'll be seeing all social media platforms on the website right now. And obviously, one of the main topics we're going to be talking about today is Cave Academy, and it's going to be awesome to talk about the teaching side of things for what you do over there, etc. So everyone is tuning in. Check the links as well in the description, and make the most of it, because this is going to be a great podcast for you guys to utilize and make the most of. So first things, first, man. Just I know we've kind of talked a wee bit about yourself already, but tell us so what exactly is your kind of what do you do exactly? What's the main thing that you specialize in?
So I guess if I had to sum it up into, say, one word, I would say it's training. That's my main thing that I do. I essentially go to companies or universities, colleges, and I run some kind of visual effects training or CG animation training, let's say. So that could be doing stuff from on-set shoot training, so capturing reference, to a bit of modeling, a bit of sculpting, again lighting, rendering, and so on, and then everything in between. Well, not everything, but a few things in between, like rigging and animation. But it's training in general. So usually someone at the minute, maybe a university, let's say, will come to me and say, we're running this course, and we want to add a component about anatomy. So it kind of ties into modeling and sculpting, and I'll go in and do a short kind of introduction to anatomy, or introduction to ZBrush, and so on. So it's so training's the kind of I would say where I spend most of my time.
Yep.
And then on top of that, because I want to stay as active as possible, I guess, because there's always things changing, and I don't want to kind of not know the latest trends or what's coming up. I also do CG. What is my role? I forget my role title actually for it. It's there's a company called Paramex Media, and they're based in the Midlands, and they do a lot of work for car companies.
Perfect.
So and my role is I'm the I forget now. I'd have to look it up.
It's okay.
I'm essentially the head of the CG design and visualization team. That's the one. It's design visualization.
That's
DV.
awesome.
And so I kind of manage the projects for Paramex Media, and we do a lot of work for Bentley. We do the car configurators for Bentley, and then we've done some work for Jaguar Land Rover, and very recently Geely for Lotus, essentially.
Wow.
And that essentially involves doing primarily car configurator kind of based projects. So if you're buying a Bentley, for example, and you're checking out the colors for the paints online,
okay.
So I kind of set up all the digital paints essentially, and did a bit of lighting and rendering for that.
That's awesome.
So if you buy a Bentley and it turns up at your door and it's the wrong color blue, that's my fault.
You're the culprit.
Yeah, that's me. And that's great, because what I'm finding is whether you're doing visual effects or you're working for car companies, everyone's got their different kind of pipelines and their different terminology, and it's a great way of learning just different things essentially. So these projects for me are both work. I've got to do the work, but at the same time I learn a whole bundle of things about the car industry and about advertising and so on, and what works for them, what doesn't work for them, both pipeline wise as well, what they're after.
That's great. Awesome. Because that's the thing as well, because I was seeing that as well, like when I saw that you did work with Bentley and Land Rover, I was like, wait, okay, this is like another area we could go down in terms of conversation. Like there's so much different things, because
I mean, that sort of stuff, I've probably just been doing it for around a year now, maybe a bit longer. So it's still quite fresh to me as well, so it's been great to kind of be involved in that sector of things,
just something different.
And again, there's been some amazing people I've got to work with, and I always find the more people you kind of meet, the more knowledge you can gain. So they've taught me a lot about how to, what they're looking for in a car, how they sell a car, what are the primary forms, etc. So it's a bit like character design, but for cars. They'll say these are the the kind of focal points of the car where we want the attention. So it's just made me look at cars in a whole new light. So when I'm walking around and I'm looking at cars, I'm now just looking at power lines, and I'm looking at wheels and so on. So it's been a big eye opener in terms of how just other people design and what they look for.
Perfect. So, like, one of the questions I was always wanting to ask was like mentoring and teaching always a thing for you? Was that the kind of career kind of ambition, or was it did it start off just a passion for art?
Yeah, good question. I think I guess before sort of CG and whatnot, I was working in a restaurant. I was a restaurant manager 9 years, going back a number of years. And part of that role was to teach the new chefs or the new waiters and so on. And obviously that just came as part of the role of management, let's say. So I think going into CG, it was a career change. It was meant to be, for me in my head at the time, let's say 10 years ago, I did want to work on big productions, Disney movies at the time. And what else was there at the time? There were, let's say Transformers. I forget when that came out.
Good choice.
It was that kind of big Hollywood production film. And I guess 10 years ago, I thought, I want to be sitting behind the desk, making the big robots, making the big dinosaurs, etc. That was the aim.
Yeah.
But then once I was at university, I still found that I was still helping people, so other students. So we had a great cohort when I was studying. I think there was around 22 of us, and everyone was very collaborative, and that was just one of the things we were doing. So it was just a natural thing to help people or to ask for help on the projects.
Yeah.
And so when I graduated, which was 2010, I was doing the normal, applying for jobs and stuff like that. But one of the positions that came up was for a demonstrator position at Bournemouth University.
Okay.
And again, I enjoyed the helping at the time, I'd call it, not teaching. So it kind of felt quite natural to go into that role. And I think I'd had a offer at a company, and it didn't pay as much as the university. And obviously working in London on a lower pay, I've got loads of kids. Well, I've got 4 kids, let's say, not
awesome.
loads. But so it was kind of one of those things of financially, it would have been better to also go for something that just paid a bit more. So it kind of ticked one of the boxes. I enjoyed helping, and at the same time, it was going to pay just a bit more, which was important at the time. So
yeah.
And then luckily, from that, I had the time to still develop my skills. So, teaching at a university, I think everyone will probably say you have your moments where you are working, but you get quite a bit of free time, holidays, and generally when you finish, you're kind of finished, unless you're actually marking and stuff like that, where it gets pretty intense. If you're part of the marking team. But if you're just what I was, a demonstrator, it just gave me an opportunity to actually develop my skills. And the best thing about teaching is you run into everyone else's problems. So therefore you pick stuff up very quickly because you have to problem solve all the time. I'm
really glad you brought that up, because that's one of the main questions I was actually wanting to talk about.
Yeah.
Well, there's actually quite a few topics. I was just wondering, first of all, out of all your years of teaching, I know this is quite a big one, but is there anything that you've what's the biggest thing you've probably learned through all your practices, etc.? Does anything stand out?
Yeah. Well, it's not anything kind of special, but I tend to find a lot of people who have an issue with their work. It's I guess there's 2 things. There's the technical issues that they'll have, and then there's the more artistic side of things. For the technical side of things, I tend to find, what I've found anyway, helping people, even my own projects, is if you're working on something for hours, days, weeks, you're probably essentially kit bashing your scene together. You're pulling stuff in left, right, and center. You're not naming stuff. Everything's in weird groups or whatever. So technically, your scene is a bit of a mess. As soon as you start cleaning it up, naming stuff, organizing things, everything starts to kind of make sense, and your scene will almost fix itself. Especially for rigging. I find when I'm helping rigging people and they say, can you help me with my rig? Something's broken. And you open the scene and you go, what the hell am I looking at? And they've not named anything. They don't know what's connected to what. And usually I'll just say, look, just clean up your scene and then we'll look again.
Yeah.
And then they'll come back and say, oh, I fixed it. And it's like, okay, great. That's all it needed. So I guess I guess when I'm teaching, I call it scene hygiene or something like that, which is just having an organized, clean, working environment essentially.
Yeah.
So I guess, helping people technically, it's just scene hygiene usually works things out. Artistically, I tend to find people don't step away from the computer enough.
Oh, I totally agree.
And that kind of gives them this very narrow vision of how the real world works. And again, I'm guilty of doing it myself, and I still do it myself. But as much as possible, I tend to try and look at some real reference, even if it's, or sometimes I'll just be out and about and I'm just looking at stuff and kind of critically analyzing real world reference as much as possible, because you can look at an image on Google Images and think you know something about something, but it's completely different in the real world. Sorry.
Oh no, on you go.
No, that was it. Really, it's mainly that kind of and also I should also say, when you're looking at reference online, it's not just photos. People look at reference, that someone else's artwork, which at that stage you're kind of looking at a reference of someone else's interpretation of the reference they looked at. So it's and I see that even again, I'm guilty of it, where your work ends up looking like someone else's work because that is your reference and you haven't got your own personality into there.
No, because I completely agree, because I was doing there's been quite a lot of people now who, I'm really glad that you brought it up, because it's trying to instill into the audience who's listening in, because I've mentioned this quite a lot of times, but we had a guest who's taught me for many years. His name's Fraser McLean, and Fraser was saying, for example, it'd be great if more people started kind of going back to traditional in the sense of just for quick observations, etc.
Totally agree.
It just I don't know, it's just it's you nailed it perfectly when you said people just don't get away from the computer that much. For example, I'm doing animal sculpting at the moment in ZBrush. But I'm very fortunate. I have a zoo not that far from me. So I can literally just go to the zoo and literally just get reference, etc., and actually just spend time being outside and just taking it all in. And I just don't know, obviously it's great to kind of make a beautiful image, and it's easier being in the comfort of your own home, but I understand that that's kind of the thing that I think education needs to kind of push more towards, as in right, let's all go outside for the day, and make it kind of a theme, as in make it consistent. And it'd be great to kind of see more of that.
Yes, definitely. I mean, I guess you can only do that with hands-on training, but it is just one of those. It's a very simple thing, which is you just tell someone you need to stand up, walk outside, and just look at stuff. Take a notebook with you, and just look at that building and analyze the materials on that building. What makes that work, what makes it doesn't work. Or like you say, you go to the zoo, you look at a creature, and you say, oh, you look at that, amazing muscle that you didn't spot before. Or maybe you'll see similarities between things. I look at my cat and sometimes I just see a person.
Awesome.
Because of some of the poses he just gets into are just so human. So you can make these connections between things, and to be honest with you, a lot of my talks are just it's a bit weird because I've run a number of talks and presentations, and some of the talks are literally just me showing pictures and then saying, you see this building, can you see how this building kind of looks like a rib cage? Now look at a rib cage, can you see how this rib cage then goes into this design and this design? Or I like the good example for anatomy is when you think about fashion, and I always show an image of the clavicles and the sternum.
Okay.
And I'll say, what does it look like? And people will go, I don't know, doesn't like nothing I'm familiar with, and then you just show a picture of a person wearing a tie, and you have the collarbones, which are the clavicles, and you have the shirt, forget what you call it now, collar, and then you have the tie, which is a very reminiscent of the sternum. So it just kind of feeds into how all these things out in the real world, in nature or pretty much in nature, have been replicated in other ways, in fashion, in architecture, in car design, in character design, in creature design, and it's all there. It's literally, all just outside.
When you said it there, like going outside, etc. as well, it's just like, when I'm thinking about this as well, I'm always thinking, how can I say it? It's like, it goes back to the whole concept, obviously, of story, etc. And so I was watching I watched like lots of live streams on Twitch, etc. And you see lots of common trends. Obviously, people always making like the same thing, but you very rarely see people doing kind of, how can I say it, something that's very kind of like, I understand that unique's a powerful word, and you don't always have to make unique things, but it just really gets like your creativity flowing, really makes you kind of go outside the box. And like, that's the great thing as well, is like experiment, like you said yourself before the podcast even started. It's like, obviously you're trying different things out, seeing what you can do, and like, this is the thing that I guess, like, so like, you're the perfect candidate for this podcast, because when it comes to education, it'd be kind of great to kind of see a change in the curriculum towards more kind of how can I say it, just getting put in like a random situation, or more kind of just out of your comfort zone, and making that a consistent habit, just so people actually think more, because I don't think enough people actually think. I know that's quite harsh to say, but
that's
but you know what I mean.
I mean, I totally agree. That's one of the things I'm pushing for in the training I want to do is I can't give you the right answers to some of the questions people ask, but hopefully, my intention is just to help people think about things and then figure things out for themselves. So it's almost a way of saying, or teaching, that allows them to take their problem, deconstruct it into its basic forms, and then figure out the answer from that. So which is why anatomy and life drawing is such a great way of teaching, because what that does, especially life drawing, is it always just talks about stripping things back. So you have the problem, which is the human figure looking, standing in front of you in a very complex pose, or maybe it's even a simple pose. And when you look at that complexity, you start doing your outline, and it just doesn't work. Your proportions are wrong, and so on. But if you strip it back to its very basic components, you have your egg shape and your cylinders and so on. Or even before that, you have the gesture, so you just knock that in. So you strip things back, and then you just build upon it. And so my teaching is very much like that, and all that just comes from observation, because by taking that complex human figure, you have to be able to break it down into those simple components. And if you don't have, I guess, the mindset to do that, then you'll struggle with a more complex design. So when I look at architecture, I guess I'm not looking at the initial, say, the bricks. What I'm looking at is that basic shape, the cylinders, the big shapes contrasting with the small shapes, and how that works as a composition. And then you look at the finer details. And it's the same, anyone doing kind of ZBrush sculpting, they'll probably talk about the primary forms and then the secondary and the tertiary forms. And it is that kind of workflow in everything, I would say, you can apply that to. But that kind of mindset, I guess we kind of live in I'm finding, I guess I've been teaching for around 10 years. If I take into consideration the restaurant managing, it's around 15 to 19 years. And I forget where I was going now, but what I tend to find is, that's it, is people want to just do the detail straight away. So they forget about structure, and they forget about function. And I guess what I'm trying to push is always just having that foundation, that underlying, structure before you start building upon it.
Yep.
And I forget. Sorry, I was just going to say, I forget. I listened to it somewhere. It was about someone to do with music, and someone said to them, how it's and you'll hear it with people who there's that like an ad where someone says, why do I have to pay this artist who did 10 minutes work this amount?
Yeah.
It's the same with music. I remember hearing about music. Someone just said, you're extremely talented musician. Not many people could do this. It's amazing. And the guy or the lady said, well, hang on a minute. I spent 10 years practicing the very basics. And then I built upon it, But they said, but every morning I spend an hour doing the basics. I spend an hour just going over those fundamentals before I can play anything more complex. And yeah, it's that whole idea of 10,000 hours or practice makes perfect, but you still got to keep practicing. I mean, I always have to go back to the basics, and most of the time I'm just rereading old notes and old texts. I still read about the skeleton. What am I looking at the minute? I'm looking at, again, just photography basics. I'm reading some old VFX books, stuff that's been written 10, 15 years ago, 100 years ago. Things change, but I still have very old things that I refresh myself on.
Yeah, keeping up to date with it.
Yeah,
because like that's the thing as well. Like you actually brought up a great question for me to kind of go down, because I was always wondering, like, what do you kind of see for the future in regards to teaching? Do you think, in regards, like, how can I say it, like, where do you think teaching is going to head? Do you think it's going to continue the way it is, or how do you think, or where would you like it to go?
I mean, I'd like it to be more. How can I say it? I guess less students. But
that's an interesting one.
No, what I mean by less students, I mean per class. I think I've seen a trend, especially in universities, in the last 5 to 10 years, where they've been trying to cram more and more students without giving the teaching team the support they need to manage that number of students. And what that's led to is students having less time with the lecturers or with the teaching team.
Totally agree.
And then they're having to learn via watching a number of videos, and they're just on their own, basically. Now, the great thing about teaching for students is they can ask questions. And if you can't do that, then you might as well just not go to university and just figure things out on your own, especially in this day and age where there is so much information on the internet. You can figure a lot out by yourself. But the good thing about being in a training center or online training course or whatever you're doing is having that ability to ask an expert a question.
Yep.
And then having that ability to go back and forth and figure things out and problem solve. I think for me, that's the important thing about teaching. It's having that contact time with a student. And I absolutely love going to events and stuff where I can just pick the brains of someone. And I was extremely fortunate at DNEG, because I was there for 5 years, and I was able, in my role I was training, but what that meant was I wasn't siloed to just talking to a number of people or a small group of people. They basically just said, you can talk to anyone in the building.
That's amazing.
Ask them whatever you want. And that was literally anyone from a runner all the way through to a VFX supervisor, HR, recruitment. I had the kind of, the ability to be in these, for me, it was bonkers, because I was in meetings with, VFX supervisors, CG supervisors, heads of departments, heads of production technology, R&D. So I got to listen in
to everything.
And I got to ask questions, and they allowed me to ask questions, and no one, I would say, which is one of the great things about working at DNEG in terms of people, no one ever said, what the hell are you talking about? Please don't ask questions. Who do you think you are? You shouldn't even be here. They were all super welcoming, and super open to allowing me to ask, sometimes what I would consider would be a stupid question, but they were just great and they would answer it. So, it's weird. It's, as much as I was a trainer at DNEG, I was a full-time student. And in terms of for my learning, I just picked up a whole bunch of stuff that I couldn't have got without being in a position like that.
Yeah.
And I guess I just made the most of it. I did just go around the building asking questions. I asked modelers, texture artists, riggers, animators. And the good thing about the VFX industry is other people come in from other companies. So I was meeting, animators from ILM or Weta, and I was meeting modelers from Framestore, MPC, and they brought their own ideas in, and we would just have conversations. And because I was the first kind of port of call, like they would come into training in week one, I got to ask them, when they're very fresh, questions about, hey, how does this work? And, how would you approach this and so on. So
it's like having a constant library.
Yeah,
non-stop resources. That's perfect.
Yeah, exactly. And luckily I still stay in touch with a lot of people in the industry. I probably go into London once or twice a week to catch up with a number of people. So because that's one of the best things about being in the industry is there's just so much knowledge.
Yep.
And if you kind of isolate yourself and just do your own thing, you'll just never grow. But if you just again, like it's the same as getting reference by stepping away from the desk and going outside, stepping away from the desk and meeting a few people and asking a few questions, even if it's, hey, what are you up to today? What are you working on? And then they'll say, oh, come over, have a look. I'm doing this cloth simulation in Venom or something.
That's sick.
It's just such a great way to learn, and it's exciting stuff they're working on. It was great to hear about this and that or see this and that.
You've just sorry to cut you off. I wasn't trying to be rude.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, what's it like working in London?
In London,
because a lot of people obviously there's lots of studios in London. I just wanted to, what's your thoughts?
So I mean, when I was working in London, I was basically going in and then coming back out. So if it's life in London, I don't really know, because I was there for 5 years, but I was literally getting the train in, working, train out again.
Oh, right, okay.
In terms of working in London, let's say for a company, again, the main company I worked at, actually the only one in terms of as an employee, was DNEG, Double Negative, for 5 years. And again, that was great for me. I met a huge bunch of people, and some of them are still there, some of them have moved on, and they were amazing, and I still stay in touch with them.
Yep.
It's extremely busy, let's say, but that's just London and VFX. At the minute, I'm kind of working with, a number of, I'm planning to do a few projects with a number of other companies, and that's going really well, hopefully.
Perfect.
I mean, in my role, because I've never been, say, an artist at a studio. I've never sat behind the desk 9 till 5, did my work, did my shots, submit them to dailies, and then go home or stay late. I was, my role was very kind of, loose and wild, essentially.
Okay.
I had a bit of freedom to kind of manage my own day a bit, to a point. I still had to do what I needed to do.
Yeah.
So I guess if you were to ask an artist, they might say I did a 9 till 5. I sat behind the desk and then I just went home. But for me, I was walking around the building, talking to people, meeting people, writing everything up afterwards. Running some presentation sessions, getting other people to run sessions. It was great in that sense. It was a very open brief almost, and again, I got to meet some amazing people and learn some amazing things every day. Every day was a new learning experience.
Perfect. Did you like, when it comes to like VFX and stuff, especially in London, and I guess just anywhere in general, like I know obviously so we've talked about things evolving, etc., and things change all the time, but is there anything that you've realised that out of all your times teaching that you've realised is still being taught but isn't in the industry anymore?
Sorry, it's not in the industry anymore.
Yeah, is like, has anything like you've realised that's like something that's still being taught? I know this is probably like a difficult question because obviously it is a broad one. Like I was just wanting to ask, like, is there anything that you've realised that because obviously the industry is changing, whether it's software, etc. Like, is there anything that you've realised that is still being taught but isn't getting used anymore?
Yeah, good question. Still being taught but not being used anymore.
I know it's a hard one to throw out.
Yeah, I'm trying to think.
Because like one of the things that I've realised, obviously this is like, for example, when I think texturing for film, I always think Mari.
Yeah.
But I realised obviously over the last few years, substance and designers obviously skyrocketing a lot of things, and I was just wondering like stuff like that.
Yeah. So I guess in terms of software, there's some things I probably wouldn't recommend spending too much time on, depending on what you're doing. But I would say, so I guess it's a weird thing because for me, it's I'm not a software junkie, and I tend to find that I don't really care what applications people use. If they still don't have a visual eye for things, then it doesn't matter what software they use. So the Zamari Substance one is an interesting one, because I guess, a lot of people are using Substance now, I guess, Painter and Designer, which is great. But Mari is still heavily used because there's a number of things that you can't do in Substance. One of the ones is painting over UV seams.
Okay.
So for visual effects, as much as Substance is used now, especially for environments, hard surface assets, and so on, for organic creatures, it still can be used. But if you're dealing with a digidouble with 30 UDIMs and its face has been chopped up in a number of ways in UV space, Mari is probably going to still be your number one application. But actually, good point. Actually, what I'm seeing though is not enough emphasis on understanding the real world. So if I had to say what's missing, hang on, the question was what can go or what is missing that maybe should come back?
Well, it's kind of you can answer whatever way you want it, because it's always good to open up. But like the main question is basically because obviously there's a lot of things that people still teach that's outdated.
Yeah. Yes.
And obviously that's always the biggest caveat when it comes to obviously that separated to like online learning, etc. Yeah,
good. Yeah, okay. So that makes more sense. So in terms of outdated stuff, I mean, software can be outdated, and I think if you can learn an application and it's not relevant for the industry that you're going into. For example, we're trying to get some junior academy students for the car industry for a company that I'm kind of helping out. And some of the students have said they want to do design and visualization, but they've got no Maya experience. They've used VRED and Alias, but they haven't got any Maya experience. Now, if you're doing if you want to get into the design and visualization, so doing the kind of final images for the car industry, it's probably going to be a Maya, V-Ray, or 3ds Max V-Ray pipeline, maybe Arnold, but mainly V-Ray.
I love V-Ray. Just had to get that out there. I love it.
V-Ray, yeah, it's fantastic. And so not having any Maya experience is probably going to be an issue, and the same for VFX. If you're getting into, say, FX, for example, and you're going to a big company, they might be using Houdini over, 3ds Max for effects or something. So knowing the industry and the applications they use is important, because you could learn something that is just not going to let you get a foot in the door, because they need someone very quick to learn their workflows within their applications in the pipeline they're using. So I would say, applications, learn whatever you like, but if you are applying to a certain kind of industry, it's good to know what they do.
Yeah.
We had to tell this person, just go and, he had some Blender experience. We said, okay, just take your knowledge in Blender, figure out Maya, and then come back to us and show us some work in Maya. And then hopefully he's going to go away and do that. So I would say, yeah, software, I wouldn't say it goes obsolete. I would just say you just got to make sure you know the right applications for the industry that you're trying to get into.
Awesome.
But then again, saying that, I don't know anyone who uses things like Lightwave in the industry, but I could be completely wrong, and it could have a striving business somewhere.
Yeah, because that's always been the thing. Because I like to ask, obviously, because when it comes to so many guests, like obviously everyone has like their different take on the question.
Yeah.
And you never know what to expect. Like for example, when you just said there about Lightwave, like I wasn't aware of that. Obviously, I understand that. Because I don't really know the software, to be honest. Obviously, I know like the ones I've always stuck to are like the common trends when it comes to just general pipeline for general 3D artists, basically.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, when I'm teaching students, I mean, for some of the stuff we're doing, we do plan to use certain applications, but we're going to mix it up. We're going to say for this project, we're going to use, I don't know, a Maya Arnold pipeline, and for then the next project, it's going to be a Houdini Katana pipeline or Houdini Solaris.
Yeah.
So there's kind of, we'll use different things, but I guess the one thing that doesn't change usually is, and this is the thing that we'll be pushing for with our training.
Okay.
Is those very fundamental building blocks. For example, anatomy doesn't change that often, although obviously evolution happens and things do change, but the human skeleton, for example, has been pretty consistent for a number of thousands of years, let's say. The way that light works in the real world hasn't changed forever. I would say, not that I know for sure, but I can pretty much place a bet to say that the sun has been spitting out light in that way for millions of years. So once you learn about those fundamentals of how light and property works and matter works and how anatomy works and how a movement, for example, you learn about how things move in arcs and whatnot and
that's a good way to describe it. That's a good way.
So what? Yeah, sorry.
Oh no, I was going to say because it'd be kind of great to kind of dive into like Cave Academy through this discussion.
Yeah. So I mean,
on you go.
Well, I was just going to say, for the courses we're going to run, as much as we'll use software, we know software changes all the time, and we will want to stay current and fresh. But software is always going to change. We've gone from cave painting to pencils and pens and inks to paints and computers now, and now we've got VR and AR and so on. So everything's always changing. But again, what doesn't change, and I always use anatomy because it's an easy thing, is your rib cage has stayed consistent throughout that period of time. So you can pretty much use that as a foundation for building something upon. So that's what we want to teach. It's basically, if we're doing any character design course, as much as it says character design, what we're teaching them is the fundamentals of how a creature or a human is designed, and then from that you can make your own stuff. And the idea is that you give them that foundation knowledge, and then they go, okay, so if I had to create a four-armed monster, I'm going to have to think about how the clavicles work and the scapula works, and how the humerus attaches to that sort of
the body part.
Second set of arms, and how does that second set of clavicles wrap around the rib cage? But if you don't know that's how the arm connects to the body, like through the clavicles, then how can you design something that's going to be believable and the audience is going to be connected to? And that's the other thing. So it's kind of those foundation skills and building relationships so people can find connection. Because I'm a very simple person. I find I'm not very complex, but I can kind of spot when things are a bit weird. And as soon as things are weird on the screen, then you have a detachment to it, and you then start to say, well, it's not real, it's CG, it's a
Like
puppet.
uncanny valley kind of thing.
Yeah, and then you just lose, the kind of idea that these filmmakers are doing, or game developers, or even a painter, that it's real, is broken, and you lose interest. I love Impressionism painting, Monet and Renoir, because you kind of know it's a painting, but at the same time, they manage to capture the light. And if you look at a real Monet and a real Renoir, it's amazing how much light has been captured in those strokes. And you accept it because they've captured what they intended to do is the light. That was their intention. And that's kind of, that's our, I guess you could think of it as our, our approach is basing things in reality, giving people an understanding of reality, so they can then make CG and they can make decisions in CG. And again, what application they decide to use, up to them. It doesn't matter if it's Mari or Substance. If you still don't understand the difference between a metal and a plastic, then it doesn't matter what you're going to use to create it. It's still going to look silly, essentially, or fake, or it's going to confuse the audience. They're not going to understand it.